You're going to rot in hell for that.
Oh,
Sorry.
Gosh.
We can quote you on that one.
What would happen if we just told the truth?
Welcome to TruthWorks, where we dig into the nitty-gritty of leadership and work.
And what needs to change? I'm Jessica Neal.
And I'm Patty McCord.
Our journey together started in HR, but trust us, it's evolved into something wild, honest, and, well, a bit rebellious.
So throw out the handbook. We're here to redefine rules to work for us, not against us.
Let's dive into another episode. Okay, everyone, welcome to another episode of TruthWorks. I'm here with Patty McCord, of course.
Hello.
And I'm Jessica Neal. And today we have a fascinating guest. I'm very, 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 very excited to talk to him. His name is Richard Cytowic. Richard is a researcher, and I guess we would call you a pioneer on a topic that I don't know much about, but you're going to tell us a ton about. Synesthesia. Did I say that correctly?
You did, yes.
Okay.
You know, anesthesia, no sensation. Synesthesia, coupled sensations.
Lots of, yeah.
Got it. And so you're a professor of neurology at George Washington University. You're the author of Synesthesia, and then The Man Who Tasted Shapes. But tell us a little bit about you, synesthesia, and then let's get into the screens.
Well, I'm a professor of neurology at George Washington University, and my interest has always been in what are called higher cortical functions, that is, memory, intellect, etc. When I was training in neurology in the 1970s, nobody cared about Alzheimer's disease. Nobody cared about aphasia, the loss of language. I actually wrote a paper called Aphasia in Maurice Ravel, the famous French composer, who suddenly had a stroke and could no longer compose, but he could critique what he was hearing. And that paper won awards as well. But that labeled me as philosophically minded because back then, you know, neurology was all about multiple sclerosis and reflexes and pinpricks and all that. And of course now, you know, in the sweep of time, things have really changed. And so everybody's sort of come up to where I was always interested in.
That is so cool. So tell us quickly about synesthesia, and then let's talk about the screens.
Well, everybody knows the word anesthesia, which means no sensation. Synesthesia means joined or coupled sensation. And there are children born with 2, 3, or all 5 of their senses hooked together, so that my voice, for example, is not only something that they hear, but they might also see it or taste it or feel it as a physical touch. They tend to assume that everybody's like them until they make some offhanded comment like, oh, my A is the most beautiful pink I've ever seen. What does your A look like? And their friends look at them and say, you are weird. And so they never talk about it again. Anyway, make a long story short, it turns out to be extremely common. 4% of the population have this. 1 in 23 people inherit the genes for this. But because it's not expressed with 100% fidelity, a smaller percentage, 1 in 90, have some kind of overt synesthesia, such as sensing the days of the week as colored or having letters and numerals perceived as colored, even though they're printed in black ink. And it's like having, and I call this a perceptual trait. It's like having perfect pitch. It appears at an early age. You either have it or you don't. You cannot practice. You cannot learn it. You cannot turn it off. You cannot not experience the world this way. I think this is really quite fascinating, is that a small change in your DNA completely alters the way you see the world. And then the question is, well, so what? This is a beautiful thing to have. What good is it? Well, they also have extraordinary memories, and sometimes they're what we call photographic because they have all these extra hooks to hang things on. And then for the rest of us, I and others think that the synesthesia gene is a gene for metaphor, for being able to see the similar in the dissimilar. So, for example, one woman says, I know it's two because it's white. Well, there's something about two-ness and whiteness that's identical for her. And so for the rest of us, this is a gene for yoking similarly, apparently dissimilar things together. And as a species, it makes us more creative. And I think that's why evolution has kept this around for such a long time, because otherwise it's pretty, but apparently useless trait. And evolution never keeps anything around unless it's doing something really important. So I think the important thing that it's doing is that it's helping us make metaphors.
Do you have the trait? How did you
No,
get
no,
interested
not at
in this?
all. No, I don't. Well, but people ask, why me? Why did I believe these people? Because early on, 40 years ago, when I told my colleagues about my index case, Michael Watson, the man who tasted shapes, they said, well, what does his CAT scan show? And I said, no, you don't understand. He doesn't have a hole in his head. He has something extra. And they looked at me like I was insane, and they said, man, you'd better stay away from this. This is too weird, too new age. It is going to ruin your career. Well, my career's been fine. And I don't know what's happened to theirs, but this is an important point, is that nature shows us her exceptions. We learn through nature's exceptions, and that's what's really important. Because when I ran into Michael Watson, my neighbor who had invited me to dinner to meet some friends, and he taught lighting design at the School of the Arts, and he said, oh, we'll be a few more minutes. There aren't enough points on the chicken. And his friends laughed and said, oh, Michael, what are you smoking now? And he turned to me, beet red, and said, oh, well, you're a neurologist. Maybe you understand. When I taste something, I also feel it on my face and in my hands. A feeling sweeps down my arm. And I said, oh, you have synesthesia. I was just trying to be polite. And he said, you mean there's a name for what I do? And then I thought, wow, how could he not know? And that's when the light bulb went off that this could be something really important. People ask, why did I believe them when everybody else said they were making it up? They only wanted attention. They were just having residual hallucinations from their years of pot smoking and LSD. And it's that, I'm gay. And as a 10-year-old in New Jersey, my father's medical profession said that I was sick. The state said that I was a criminal. And the church said that I was damned to hell. And I hadn't done anything. I was 10 years old, for God's sakes. So I thought, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know me. So when people said about Michael Watson and other things, oh, this can't possibly be real, it's like, oh, I have heard this before.
Yeah.
And so
then
the issue became, what's the harm in looking? Why are people so adamantly against this? Why the resistance was so fierce? And it's like, that's really weird. Why are they so adamantly against this? There's no harm in looking. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm barking up the wrong tree and I'll go someplace else.
Jessica and I spent our whole careers interviewing people and finding people to do particular jobs. And at Netflix, we had to seek out people who could wrap their brains around problems that nobody had solved before. Mm-hmm. We found over time that it was inside of people's brains and how they thought that created this incredible opening to change things or perceive things differently.
People who think differently outside the box.
Yeah, I did a talk once at a recruiting event. There were like 600 recruiters in the room. And I said, how many of you recruit software engineers? And 600 hands went up. And I said, how many of you have sat next to somebody when they write code? And nobody had. And the reason I'm bringing that up is that the idea that you can paint and create, real life experiences with zeros and ones or mathematical formulas is a different way of thinking. And so I think that's a really good segue for us to go to, okay, so you start with synesthesia, complex, ethereal, nobody's supposed to understand it. You get deep into this. And now your new book is called The Stone Age Brain. so like work
In
with me on
age.
like this, it's so complex and it's so beautiful to Stone Age.
Well, the brain we have today is no different than the one that our distant ancestors had 3 million years ago.
Is that true?
Technology takes off exponentially. I don't know, I would say every 10 years, but every couple of years, Apple and all these other things come out with a new version. But evolution doesn't say, oh, gee, it's been a decade. Let's come up with a new way to do memory. Let's come up with a new plan for the cerebral cortex, for this, that, and the other. No, it doesn't. Evolution advances by what's called accretion. So once it hits upon something that works, a solution that works, that's good enough, then it keeps it. And then it builds on that. So it's sort of like a New England add-on house. I don't know if you've seen these where you take a house and you add on one room after another. And after a while, it looks like an absolute mishmash, but it works.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's our brains. We're a New England add-on.
We're a New England add-on, right?
Mishmash.
Our brains are built by accretion, and we have the same Stone Age brain as our distant ancestors. And so that's a problem for us in today's world.
Well, what I found interesting when I was researching you in looking at the book is you and maybe you can talk to us a little bit about it, but you talk about this sort of Stone Age brain as, really trying to survive and beat predators, right? That were out to get you or hunt, right? And then today, our brains are still functioning that way, yet the things that we're interacting with on the screens and things like that are in an entirely different type of deal.
Yeah, I open up with this scenario of a family, a small nuclear gathering, who wake up in the morning and go out to hunt. The men go to hunt and gather, the women go to gather stuff in the tide pools. We have the same drives as our ancestors had, which is to succeed and flourish. So, nothing much has changed. It's just that the environment that we're working in is totally different. And so our ancestors' novelty, that activated what I call our change detector. And any change in existing circumstances just seized our attention. Okay, and it could be the smell of smoke, a snap of a twig, a strange sound, etc. And in today, we're surrounded by all kinds of changes, novel changes, and I don't think our attention can keep up with it. And the worst one is, of course, is our phone, that we're looking at the endless scroll of our screen. When you're eating, unless you're a glutton and you stuff yourself to the point that you can't eat anymore, you reach your phone and you say, okay, I've had enough, I'm full. But when you're looking at the stimuli, the endless scroll, well, when do you stop? There's no signal that says, okay, you've had enough, you've reached the end, because there never is an end. And this is what is so addictive, is this constant stimulation. And this is like having a slot machine in your hand, and which is exactly what the behavioral psychologists who work for these companies have designed it to be: positive intermittent reinforcement, which means that, Pavlov's dog, we all know that you ring the bell, it salivates. Okay, that's classical conditioning. But positive intermittent reinforcement means that you get a reward only some of the time on a random schedule that you can't predict. So you're scrolling and you get a hit. Oh, that's funny. That's beautiful. That's sexy. That's whatever. And then you keep going. Maybe I'll get another one. And you keep going and going and waiting for something, a political affirmation, anything. And it never comes.
So what impact do you think that this is having on our brains?
Oh, I think it's having a terrible impact on them. It is really distracting them to death, and which is why people can't get anything done. Everybody admits that their attention spans have gone to hell. And so what are you going to do about it? I mean, the obvious thing is to turn the phone off, put your screen down. But most people aren't willing to do that. So, or people say, well, I have to have this for my work or whatever. Well, that's a debatable point. Do you really need it? So, you mean parents say, oh, I have to be in contact with my little darling, my little 3-year-old at school. Well, I managed without anybody being able to, if there was a real emergency, they would call the principal's office and the principal would come get us. So like, why do 3-year-olds need to have an iPhone to be in contact with their parents? And part of the problem is that the parents are so obsessed with maintaining control and they can't let go of having to see everything every moment. This is another thing that screens have done. It's just made us obsessed.
Yeah. I'm trying to, I will have a 5-year-old, but he will not have a phone.
Good for
that
you.
Has internet access until he's out of school.
Almost all the tech people in Silicon Valley send their children to the Waldorf School of the Peninsula. And Waldorf education is famous for having no technology until you're about 12 years old. So you do felt work, you do sculpture, you do this, that, the other. And the kids don't miss it, but it's the parents who freak out. And it takes a while to convince the parents that, no, you're not having any tech for this.
Yeah, but it's sort of this inevitable tide, isn't it? I mean, I was thinking as you were talking about like, okay, so what changes when we're all wearing glasses that, feed into our brain all this data and information that's happening that's not even in the real physical world. And so, I mean, my base question is like, is it going to make us stupider or is it going to help us get smarter? Or
I think it already has made us stupider. I mean, look at Nicholas Carr's book, the Internet, The Shallows of the Internet. I think he and some other people have argued very strongly that, yes, it has made us dumber. People talk about having, they talk about critical thinking without ever defining what that's supposed to mean. But they also talk about connecting the dots. Well, young people today who are obsessed with their phones, they don't have any dots to connect. So you can say, I can look anything up on Google. Well, yes, I can. But unless I know what I want to know, then what am I supposed to look up? I won't have any dots to connect. I mean, Pat Sajak of the Wheel of Fortune long ago said, we don't do books anymore because nobody reads books. So the books were useless as a clue because the contestants would go,
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you and I both wrote books, so clearly
we
that's
read
not,
books too.
And we read books, and
Yes.
I would
we're
say,
in the minority.
Yeah, but I mean, people read online too, and people.
Yes, but reading online is like you're reading a screen full at a time.
Yeah,
and so I argue that engaging in linear reading, which is reading long form nonfiction or fiction, so that you get to discern the characters and their points of views and their desires and all that. When you get to who was it that was said? The novelist. I can't think of his name. He said that when you get to an end of a book, the finishability of it, you're left with William Styron. I said you're left with a drain. You feel drained that you've gone through something, that you've lived through an experience, and you don't get that with scrolling through a phone or an iPad.
Is that because of our Stone Age brain? Wants endings, or I mean, connect me to the neurology of it.
Well, I mean, we have always been interested in stories. Stories give us solace and succor because we want to know what has happened before and what's going to happen now in the future. And that's why we like stories, because we look to the past to tell us, how is my present going to end? Or how might it end? And that that's very satisfying to us.
So I have a question on this and the impacts of work. Like, right? Because we all need our phones and our screens to be successful at work. We're all on screens right now. Lots of work gets done on the phone or on your computer. But what impact do you think it's having in the workplace?
Well, I think it's hugely distracting in the workplace. I've done a few other podcasts about work. And, my advice is minimize distractions. The open workspace is the worst possible environment whatsoever because you're distracted all the time. And once you are distracted, it takes about 11 to 23 minutes to get back to what you were doing. So
is that true?
Yes, the research is very, very firm on this. And so the question is, how does anybody ever get anything done if you're constantly distracted? I mean, the ability to have an office where you shut the door is it's heaven's blessing. So I would say my advice is, all right, we all have to have email and text messages and all that, but we can't have them all the time. So set a time. Like me, I look at my email at 4 a.m. every morning. I wake up very early. Okay, I'm an older person. So I do that. And then I look at it again around 4 p.m. before I decide to shut off and make a cocktail for myself. So, and other than that, I'm not available. And, it used to be when I was a resident in neurology, we had beepers that we wore on our belts.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what a status symbol that was. I am so important. I must be reachable at all times. Well, now being unreachable is the ultimate status symbol.
Right,
and I think
right.
a lot of CEOs have adopted this principle that, here's when I'm available. Here's when you can text me. Jensen Huang of NVIDIA has a marvelous system he calls 5TP, five most important things. And even the lowest person in echelon can email him with what their division is doing and all that. And he reads them. And they have now become trained to know that they send this on Sunday night. So, because they know he sits there with a glass of scotch at his side and he's reading these hundreds of emails and he's going to respond so that come Monday morning, they're ready to hit the ground running. So I think this is and so basically it doesn't ruin the staff's weekend because he's busy answering emails and, they get to have their weekend, etc. And they know that, okay, Sunday we'll send them out. Monday we'll get the answer and we're ready to go.
I also read that you're not a believer in multitasking.
Oh, no.
You don't.
Well, we can't.
Yes.
We can't multitask. It's impossible.
What?
No, we can't. We cannot.
So talk more about that because, isn't that's the ultimate work thing? I'm a great multitasker.
When you show people how awful they are when they try to multitask, they deny the evidence. They say, "Oh no, I'm really good at this." It's like,
so give us the evidence.
So you're just going to deny it, right? Yeah, multitasking. It's like your computer. Your computer can't multitask either. What it does, if you say you have 5 tasks, then it splits those tasks into 20 milliseconds each, and it keeps cycling through them all until it's done. And this is why the more you ask your computer to do, the slower it is. Everybody knows that it gets bogged down, and our mind gets bogged down too. The bottleneck is what we call working memory. And working memory is the little cauldron in which we're holding whatever we're working on at the given moment. Now, an illustration of the limits of working memory is the marvelous Oscar fiasco in which they announced the wrong Best Picture, okay? Why did they do that? Because Andrew Cullinan of PricewaterhouseCoopers, who was on his side of the stage, he was tweeting about Emma Stone as she was walking off. And that's the exact moment that he should have been discarding his envelope and queuing up the next one. So working memory cannot hold 2 things in it at the same time. And so if you try to multitask, it's a fool's errand.
Interesting.
So it's just one big fat lie. We all think that it's possible, but you're
It's
saying
not a
like
fat lie. I mean, people talk about it all the time, and they think they multitask, but what they're doing is that they're switching attention from A to B to C to D to A to B and back and forth. And
It's not
switching
really
attention from
multitasking.
one thing to the other is the most energy-intensive thing that the brain can do. One of the things I do is I think in engineering terms of what's the energy cost of thinking or doing a certain task. The brain is an energy hog. It consumes 20% of the calories ingest every day, but it only accounts for 2% of our body's weight. And so most of that energy goes to maintaining the physical structure, pumping sodium and potassium ions across membranes to maintain the brain's physical structure. So there's very, very little left over for what we're all interested in, which is thinking, okay?
or the Kardashians.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Whichever.
No,
Yeah.
thinking.
Thinking about the Kardashians. Sorry.
Well, it's Real Housewives for me.
No, but I mean, it makes me think about the stuff that happens when you're
Yeah.
scrolling, right?
Yeah.
Oh, God. So talking to you one-on-one consumes about half the bandwidth that I have available. And so trying to listen to two of you at the same time is near impossible because it's exceeded my bandwidth.
You're not the only one.
Yeah, you're not our first person we've exceeded their bandwidth. But I was thinking too, like as you were talking, how do we make our brains more healthy?
Oh, that's easy.
What?
Well, the first step is, and I tell this to my medical students all the time, step one is go to bed. Getting enough sleep will get you the most bang for the buck for everything, okay?
Really?
So go to sleep, get your rest, right? And the other is just try to do one thing and believe that doing one thing at a time is much more efficient than trying to do 2 or 3 or 4 things at once. So pick something. It's the old adage when you're opening the mail, pick up a piece of paper once, deal with it, and throw it in the trash, and you're done with it. Don't sit and procrastinate and think, well, I'll get to it later. No, do it now. So one thing at a time is the other thing.
And then what about at work? If we bring it back to work a little bit, what advice do you have for leaders or companies? I mean, you sort of gave the Jason at NVIDIA example, but is it to create boundaries? Is it to have offices?
Well, yeah, so I think one is to realize that your employees are really distracted by all sorts of things. And so what can you do to minimize those distractions? You might have, a conference room. And so we're going to meet in the conference room every day at this time and that time, this time in the morning, that time in the afternoon. You can encourage, the lunchroom, the break room, where people get to socialize. I mean, one of the really bad things about digital devices is that they're so isolating. This is why people are so lonely, because they don't socialize. I mean, social media is such a ridiculous oxymoron. There's nothing social about it. It is completely alienating. Mark Zuckerberg, the hell with you. You want to make us more connected? Well, you haven't. You made us more alone and isolated. And, you're going to rot in hell for that.
Oh,
Sorry.
We can quote you on that one.
You can imagine how I feel about Mark Zuckerberg. Yeah, you can quote me on that. He's one of the most evil forces on the planet.
What does isolation do to your brain?
Well, it removes you from the thing that what the brain wants to do most of all, which is socialize. Aristotle said man is a political animal, and he didn't mean that we're interested in matters of state, but that we live in a polis, a city of other individuals. And so it is natural for us to want to connect to other people. I mean, take a newborn. Their vision is 2400, and yet you hold them in your arm, and there is nothing more fascinating to a newborn than another human face. They lock onto that face. Their pupils dilate. They smile and coo. I mean, every parent and grandparent knows this. And they are primed to be social animals. And so, I say that the iPad is the worst babysitter of all. It's akin to child abuse, because when you put an iPad over the bassinet or in the potty trainer or in the car seat, you are blocking the developing vision of a young individual. And you're interfering with critical periods in which they're learning a visual apprenticeship with the world. And so iPads, the characters on an iPad talk at a child. They don't talk with it the way a parent or a grandparent or an uncle like me, the uncle, talks to them.
I'm starting to feel very bad because I try not to do the screen too much, but I mean, I do. When I have to get something done, I do let him watch a little iPad. And now I'm feeling like I'm abusing my child.
If you're going to do that, the thing is to watch it together if you can, and FaceTime.
But I have to do something.
FaceTime with grandma is good, But,
we do that a lot.
But if you're letting him use the iPad, then come and what children need are intelligent adults to speak to them in full sentences and to engage with them just as another human being. That's what's going to help them learn language the fastest and the best.
That I'm doing. I think I'm doing.
Yeah.
But there's a dichotomy in the because when we were talking about multitasking. I was thinking about perhaps one of the reasons why people are so enamored with working from home is because they got to get away from those open environments with all the distractions.
That could be, yes.
A lot of times when you're at home, even everybody I know that works from home, the kids don't get to come in there, right? I mean, you're paying attention because you're doing that one. It allows more focus.
Yeah,
it does.
And so there's that.
And you can wear sweatpants, right?
Yeah, but there's a tension between what I heard you say was the focus and sequencing, right? Which is how your brain can really concentrate, and it's the best, most energy efficient use of your brain. To the social part, is that a different thing?
Well, no, I don't know. There's no conflict there. I think. I mean, it is that we are social creatures and we do like to engage with other people. But also when we're focused on a task, it really helps to just stay focused on it right now. So if I'm doing something right now, I'm also not talking to 3 other people at the same time, and I'm not, or I'm not playing bridge with them or knitting or whatever the task may be. So, yeah, there's not a conflict there.
Okay.
I have to tell you, you've completely inspired me to do what I was going to do anyway this afternoon, which is gaze into the face of my 2-month-old granddaughter.
Yes.
And so there you go.
Yeah.
No screens for that baby, although I'll probably take a selfie.
The other thing is to go take a walk outside, have a whole chapter on silence as an essential nutrient. And the brain needs downtime. It can't be on all the time. We need to trip that circuit breaker and just say, stop. And it can be simple things like, what the Dutch call Nixon, which is doing nothing, which stare out the window, look at the trees, look at the clouds, look at the birds. And it only takes 20, 30 seconds to do that. It doesn't take long to trip that circuit breaker. And even better is to go outside in nature. Everybody knows that nature is restorative. A walk on the beach or in the woods is marvelously restoring. But you don't need that degree of immersion. You can just eat lunch under a tree in a city park. That's enough. And these trees and the bushes, walk around the neighborhood and look at the bushes and your neighbors' lawns and stuff. All these plants are putting off what are called phytochemicals that actually influence us. And we're totally unconscious that they do because we don't have any receptors to know that they're there, but they're influencing us.
So will you indulge us in a career confession?
Oh, sure. Yes.
Okay.
Happy to.
Go ahead, Patty.
Okay. How can I improve my work-life balance whilst also proving that I have the commitment necessary for leadership? Since I got made manager last year, there's been certain unspoken expectations that my work cell needs to stay on in the evenings so I can respond to the odd email or message if needed. I'm starting to feel a little bit of anxiety and guilt when I have other plans and I find myself checking to see if anyone needs me, even though I've never been told off for having a life outside of work.
Well, the first thing I would say is you've got to train your superiors and subordinates that you're not available for emails after work. Tell them they can save it for 8 o'clock in the morning when everybody is fresh. There's no such thing as an emergency that's going to come up at work. So I would say work to change everybody's expectations. And I think if you tell people, here's when I'm available, I'm happy to hear from you, but these are the hours that you can email me. And if you email me outside of these hours, I won't respond until 8 o'clock the next morning. So that's one thing to just sort of take that anxiety off of you. Because, I mean, what your questioner really describes is a self-induced anxiety. I've got to be available. I've got to do this.
Right.
It's like, nobody can live up to that level of human expectation.
The other thing the questioner describes is the anxiety came with my promotion.
Yeah.
Right. It's like I was fine until now I'm responsible.
You've been bumped up to another level. And of course, that's like that ought to, in addition to the responsibilities and the salary bump, then the expectations also go up along with it. But the question is, how much are those expectations due to external forces and how much are they due to the expectations you're holding on yourself?
Well, I think that that's a good question because is it, there may be expectation at work or not, but I think, I am guilty of this, of creating more anxiety on myself.
I would say cut yourself some slack.
Yeah.
You know how to do the job. If you didn't, you wouldn't have gotten the promotion.
Exactly.
So just pat yourself on the back and say, good job, and just put one foot in front of the other.
Chill the fuck out.
Yeah, chill out, and give yourself some grace. And if you miss an email and you don't respond until 8 o'clock the next morning, to your point, Richard, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, the earth won't have melted.
Yeah.
I remember somebody saying to me, we were doing a software transition, Patty, it's like the patient's still alive, but we're removing the heart and all the veins from the body and replacing them while they're still breathing. I'm like, no, it's not.
It's literally not.
It's software. Okay. And if it doesn't work, you know what we'll do? Go back to what we did yesterday and figure it out.
Yeah.
No, there's no patient on the table bleeding. So let's knock it off with the life and death metaphors.
That's great advice. Knock it off.
That's right.
Richard, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
And we can't wait for your next book. If our listeners want to find out more about you, where do they go?
Well, they can go to my website, which is cytowic.net, cytowic.net. And there's a link tree there for all my stuff. Yeah. And I would recommend that they read my essay from the Los Angeles Review of Books, The Night I Danced with Liberace, because I did.
Oh, I'm going to go read it.
Now.
Yeah, I'm going to go read it. Richard, thank you so much. We had so much fun.
Thanks for listening to TruthWorks. This episode was produced and edited by Megan Hayward. Thank you to Kathleen Speckert and the whole Edit Audio team.